Chapter 21 of Babbitt. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Mike Vendetti. MikeVendetti.com. Babbitt by Sinclair Lewis. Chapter 21. The International Organization of Boosters Clubs has become a world force for optimism, mainly pleasantry, and good business. Chapters are to be found now in 30 countries. 920 of the 1,000 chapters, however, are in the United States. None of these is more ardent than the Zenith Boosters Club. The second March lunch of the Zenith Boosters was the most important of the year, as it was to be followed by the annual election of officers. There was agitation abroad. The lunch was held in the ballroom of the O'Hearn House. As each of the 400 boosters entered he took from a wallboard a huge celluloid button announcing his name, his nickname, and his business. There was a fine of 10 cents for calling a fellow booster by anything but his nickname at a lunch, and as Babbitt joyfully checked his hat the air was radiant with shouts of "Hello, Chet!" and "How are you, Shorty?" and "Top of the morning, Mac." They sat at friendly tables for 8, choosing places by lot. Babbitt was with Abbott Booze, the merchant tailor, Hector Saybolt of the Little Sweetheart Condensed Milk Company, Emil Wengert, the jeweler, Professor Pomfroy of the Rightway Business College, Dr. Walter Gorbutt, Roy Teagarden, the photographer, and Ben Berkeley, the photo engraver. One of the merits of the Booster Club was that only 2 persons from each department of business were permitted to join, so that you at once encountered the ideals of other occupations and realized the metaphysical oneness of all occupations: plumbing and portrait painting, medicine, and the manufacture of chewing gum. Babbitt's table was particularly happy today because Professor Pomfroy had just had a birthday, and was therefore open to teasing. "Let's pump about how old he is," said Emil Wengert. "Now let's paddle him with a dancing pump," said Ben Berkeley. But it was Babbitt who had the applause with, "Don't talk about pumps to that guy. The only pump he knows is a bottle. Honest, they tell me he's starting a class in home brewing at the old college." At each place was the Boosters Club booklet listing the members. Though the object of the club was good fellowship, yet they never lost sight of the importance of doing a little more business. After each name was the member's occupation. There were scores of advertisements in the booklet, and on one page the admonition, "There's no rule that you have to trade with your fellow boosters, but get wise, boy. What's the use of letting this good money go outside our happy family?" And at each place today there was a present, a card printed in artistic red and black: Service and Boosterism. Service finds its finest opportunity and development only in its broadest and deepest application, and the consideration of its perpetual action upon reaction. I believe the highest type of service, like the most progressive tenets of ethics, senses unceasingly and is motivated by active adherence and loyalty to that which is the essential principle of boosterism, good citizenship, in all its factors and aspects. Dad Peterson. Compliments of Dadbury Peterson Advertising Corporation. Ads, not fads, at Dad's. The boosters all read Mr. Peterson's aphorism and said they understood it perfectly. The meeting opened with the regular weekly stunts. Retiring President Virgil Gunch was in his chair, his stiff hair like a hedge, his voice like a brazen gong of festival. Members who had brought guests introduced them publicly. "This tall, red-headed piece of misinformation is the sporting editor of the Press," said Willis Jemez, and H. Hazen, the druggist, chanted, "Boys, when you're on a long motor tour and finally get to a romantic spot or scene and draw up and remark to the wife, 'This is certainly a romantic place,' it sends a glow right up and down your vertebrae. Well, my guest today is from such a place, Harper's Ferry, Virginia, in the beautiful Southland, with memories of good old General Robert E. Lee and that brave soul, John Brown, who, like every good booster, goes marching on." There were 2 especially distinguished guests: the leading man of the Bird of Paradise Company playing his week at the Dodsworth Theater, and the mayor of Zenith, the Honorable Lucas Prout. Virgil Gunch thundered, "When we managed to grab this celebrated thespian off his lovely aggregation of beautiful actresses, and I got to admit I butted right into his dressing room and told him how the Boosters appreciated the high-class artistic performance he's giving us, and don't forget that the treasurer of the Dodsworth is a Booster and will appreciate our patronage, and when on top of that we yank his honor out of the Malfutious duties at City Hall, then I feel we've done ourselves proud, and Mr. Prout will now say a few words about the problems and duties." By rising vote the Boosters decided which was the handsomest and which the ugliest guest, and to each of them was given a bunch of carnations, donated, President Gulch noted, by Brother Booster H. G. Yeager, the Jennifer Avenue florist. Each week, in rotation, 4 Boosters were privileged to obtain the pleasures of generosity and publicity by donating goods or services to 4 fellow members, chosen by lot. There was laughter this week when one of the contributors was announced as Barnabas Joy, the undertaker. Everybody whispered, "I can think of a couple of good guys to be buried if his donation is a free funeral." Through all these diversions the Boosters were lunching on chicken croquettes, peas, fried potatoes, coffee, apple pie, and American cheese. Gunch did not lump the speeches. Presently he called on the visiting secretary of the Zenith Rotary Club, a rival organization. The secretary had the distinction of possessing State Motor Car License Number 5. The Rotary secretary laughingly admitted that wherever he drove in the state, so low a number created a sensation, and though it was pretty nice to have the honor, yet traffic cops remembered it only too darn well, and sometimes he didn't know but what he'd almost as soon have just plain B56876 or something like that. Only let any doggone Booster try to get number 5 away from a live Rotarian next year, and watch the fur fly. And if they'd permit him, he'd wind up calling for a cheer for the Boosters and Rotarians and the Kiwanis all together. Babbitt sighed to Professor Pumphrey, "Be pretty nice to have a low number as that. Everybody'd say, 'He must be an important guy. Wonder how he got it. I'll bet he wined and dined the superintendent of Motor License Bureau to fare you well.'" Then Chum Frink addressed them. "Some of you may feel that it's out of place here to talk on a strictly highbrow and artistic subject, but I want to come out flat-footed and ask you boys to O.K. the proposition of a symphony orchestra for Zenith. Now, where a lot of you make your mistake is assuming that if you don't like classical music and all that junk, you ought to oppose it. Now, I want to confess that though I'm a literary guy by profession, I don't care a rap for all this long-haired music. I'd rather listen to a good jazz band at any time to some piece by Beethoven that hasn't any more tune to it than a bunch of fighting cats, and you couldn't whistle it to save your life. But that isn't the point. Culture has become as necessary an adornment and advertisement for a city today as pavements or bank clearances. It's culture in theaters and art galleries and so on that brings thousands of visitors to New York every year. And, to be frank, for all our splendid attainments, we haven't yet got the culture of a New York or Chicago or Boston, or at least we don't get the credit for it. The thing to do, then, as a blithe bunch of go-getters, is to capitalize culture, to go right out and grab it. Pictures and books are fine for those that have the time to study 'em, but they don't shoot out on the road and holler, "This is what little old Zenith can put up in the way of culture." That's precisely what a symphony orchestra does. Look at the credit Minneapolis and Cincinnati get. An orchestra with first-class musicians and a swell conductor. And I believe we ought to do the thing up brown and get one of the highest paid conductors on the market, providing he ain't a Hun. It goes right into Beantown in New York and Washington. It plays at the best theaters to the most cultured and moneyed people. It gives such class advertising as a town can get in no other way. And the guy who is so short-sighted as to crib his orchestra proposition is passing up the chance to impress the glorious name of Zenith on some big New York millionaire that might establish a branch factory here.